Good evening, students. Do you hear me?
Yes,
Yes,
teacher.
teacher, I can hear you.
Okay, welcome everybody.
Thank you.
Tonight we're going to discuss the video that you watched about teacher Carlos' lesson, and also we are going to talk about CLIL, which is the topic that you have for this week task. So I would like to start by asking you what you remember about teacher Carlos' lesson, teacher Carlos' video. What called your attention? Something you want to share about that?
Yes, teacher.
Flor,
Can I?
sure.
Thank you, teacher. Well, yes, teacher, I had the opportunity to watch the video about Carlos Montilla's video, and I think that it was very interesting. He centered the attention to improve the interaction activity with the students. I think that it was very interesting to see that Carlos asked his students uh, different questions about different topics. I didn't see any specific topic, teacher. It was very curious for me because I didn't see any specific topic. He was speaking about numbers, about how they can introduce somebody to another person, interact each other about different aspects like games, like different games with numbers, with any topic. But I consider that was very interesting activity because he interact with them in different aspects, and he approved this in order to explain different aspects. Maybe when John Hyde or Joseph Johan, I don't remember, uh, maybe make any mistake, he correct them and explain what is the correct form. So for me, it was a good class. In my case, for example, excellent example for me because I teach my students exactly at the same uh, place, for example. So it's a good example for me, and if he let me, I'm gonna hmm, take some aspect about his class for my next classes with my private students, teacher.
Okay, thank you, Flor, for your comment, for your opinion. Well,
Okay, thank
Flor,
you very much.
thank you, Flor. Flor mentioned the idea of interaction and mentioned the idea of teacher Carlos correcting students' mistakes. And she also mentioned that she didn't see like a specific topic during the lesson. So there are those three things I would like that other person can tell about that. So, did anybody see a specific topic during the lesson? How did teacher Carlos correct the students' mistakes? And how did teacher Carlos promote a student-teacher interaction?
I think I can answer the question by saying that Teacher Carlos, he promoted the. Um, at, at first, I didn't notice what was the topic. Like you said before, he was like finding out what was the students' actual level and the students' needs by starting the conversation with simple questions and going to a higher level through different, you know, uh, structures of language that would demand from his students to speak more. The so he was like basically trying to get them to talk to each other about different things as he was noticing the language and proposing on different activities. One thing I noticed about the correction that he used is at times he wouldn't like tell the student what does a mistake or something, but he would like repeat what the student said but in the correct form. So he wouldn't say like, "Oh, that's incorrect," or you're not saying it right. So, for example, I remember a case where a student said something like, I'm not leaving," or something like, and he didn't like immediately said it's a mistake, so he would repeat putting like specific intonation on the part of the sentence or phrase where there was a mistake in order for the student to notice what was the correct form of doing that.
And,
So
and was that effective?
yeah, I think students were noticing it. They when they would say the sentence again, the students would notice that even though the teacher was repeating them, they would like, oh, he's correcting me, but he's not exposing me in front of these other guy that is right next to me. So I would say that it worked at times, and the three pieces of videos.
Okay.
He did that.
Is there anything in the video that called your attention in his lesson?
I would say that the fact that he kept, to me, more than a lesson, he kept the conversation going. He made it pretty natural. Like, when you go sometimes with private classes, you expect the teacher, even though it's private and there's like 2 or 3 people involved, you would explain at times the teacher like stopping the class and explaining and presenting, but he was keeping like the interaction going and what Floor said. Like the fact that he keep both of them, like going to each other with different types of interaction and as the lesson went on. I think that was a very good approach for private lessons, which is I know that sometimes it's difficult. People would say, "Oh, it's easy because it's only 2 students," but at times it's more complicated because you need to be very focused. You have less time allotted to the transition from one activity to the other, because if the students complete them quick, you need to be ready to go on, and he keep doing that by allowing them to go on with the conversation and do a spontaneous focus on linguistic forms at times.
Okay, yeah, that could be something teachers need to deal with when having personalized lessons. Okay, thank you, Giancarlo. Well, I would like other person tell about other ideas on how to correct the students' mistakes. Teacher Carlos, as Giancarlo mentioned, use a technique which is to repeat or to say the correct sentence with a specific intonation on the part of the sentence that had the mistake. There is not a single effective way to correct mistakes. So we can try different ones and see which one works for our students. Which is other technique that teachers can use to correct students' mistakes? Do you hear me?
Yep.
Yes, teacher,
Oh,
yes.
okay, thank you. Well, think about each one of you, please. Think about the techniques that you use to correct your students, and tell me what you do. Tell the class what you do. Does it work? Have you tried any other?
Good evening, teacher.
Good evening, John.
Uh,
No.
I would like to say you 2 techniques that normally I use. If I working on fluency, I correct the mistakes at the end of the activity or at the end of the class. For example, if they are using the verb to be, but they are using the verb not in gerund, but also in infinity. So at the end of the lesson, I correct the mistakes, maybe writing on the board. If I'm working, if I'm not working in fluency, I can use for correct sentences my fingers. So, if, for example, they are talking and they're saying one verb or adverb, they have a mistake, I put the first finger in the correct words, and then when they are saying one word in a bad way, I don't put my finger up. Those are two ways to correct mistakes for me.
Okay. Thank you, Andres. So some of you probably could try with that one and see if it works. As I told before, as I said before, there is not a single one that works. Thank you, Andres. Well, Giancarlo mentioned that teacher Carlos was good at eliciting information from the students and keeping the conversation going. How did he did it? How did he do it? Please, another person who can answer that question. How did teacher Carlos help students to keep the conversation going? How did he promote student-teacher interaction? I mean, he was not the only one who was asking questions all the time, but students also interacted. I mean, they had the opportunity to to initiate the interaction. How did the teacher, um, how
Well,
did the
well,
teacher?
teacher, can I?
Okay, Flor.
Well, I saw that Carlos not only he asks questions, but also the students too. He asked that them to ask question each other, and at the beginning of the lesson of the class, he let the students ask question him to Carlos. So I consider that he approached this moment to interact, not only ask question but also answer the question that the students are saying. That's he.
Okay, right. So he asked the students to write questions for him. Yes, to ask him questions. But also sometimes those students, when they were asked, they answer with just a single word. So, for example, he asked, "Are you single or married?" The student answered, "I'm married." What else did the teacher do to keep the conversation going?
He used follow-up questions.
He used follow-up questions all the time. So to he was trying to ask it. He actually asked different questions to find out more information about the students and to have them to speak more. So he was trying to give the students the floor so they could speak. He was not the only one who was speaking all the time.
Yes, and teacher, and not only was were only questions. Sometimes was a dialogue. For example, are you married? Yes, I am married. And do you have kids? Yes, I have kids. How many? What are their names? So something like a dialogue, not only alone questions.
Exactly. So all the questions were following about a topic which was the students' personal information or about their families. As Sharon wrote, the teacher asked students about his lives, so their lives. So in that way, he personalized the lessons because the students had something to say about them. Um, Well, Flora mentioned that she didn't, and Giancarlo mentioned that they didn't see like any specific topic during the lesson. I disagree. Does anybody identified the topic of the lesson, like the communicative objective and the topic of the lesson, of Carlos' lesson? Okay, Giancarlo wrote that the topic was introducing oneself to someone. And introducing oneself and introducing someone. Uh, that was the topic. Good. What else? What else called your attention? Something you watch in that video that you think you could use in your lessons or that gave you ideas? How did the teacher keep a student's attention? Well, Shannon wrote by the movement he made. Could you explain that, please, Sharon? Okay, with his corporal expression, yes, he used body language, right?
Good night, teacher.
What
Hello, Sharon.
Excuse me. What I saw was that he moved his hands and tried to catch their attention by that corporal expression, because he wasn't all the time just sitting in front of them. He also moved, and when he made them laugh, he moves again. So the students follow those movements in order to try to understand what the teacher is going to say or ask them.
That was a way to make himself understood.
Yeah.
Okay.
he also seemed interested in what the students were saying.
Exactly.
That's something teachers usually don't do. I mean, they ask a question to the student and they just wait for the student to answer you like a machine, like I don't care what you're saying. But he looked like he was interested in their answers, and that make the students to be attentive to whatever he was going to say. Because by the way, he also used positive reinforcement every time they said something. So like they also the like had the students like keeping it like their attention to what Carlos was saying.
Exactly, because he asked again questions about what was discussed before. So you remember he asked after 3 exercises, he asked again about previous information that has been shared. For example, name of children, um, for example, one of the students' hobbies. So he was trying to make students realize that it was not only a conversation to practice English, but also that it needed to look more natural and that he was actually interested in the information. He was keeping the information in his mind, and he was trying to make students also work on paying attention and trying to memorize the information, because they were going to be asked about that later during the class. Okay, what did you notice about the way he gave instructions? What happened right after he gave the instructions? So he said, now you're going to watch this video and you're going to do this and that. What happened right after that? What did he usually do? Okay, he gave them enough time to answer the questions, right? What else? He gave them feedback, right? But right after he gave them instructions, he modeled the activity that they had to do. For example, if they had to write some numbers, so in the bingo chart, so he gave them an example of that. If they had to write information about the video, so he gave them an example about what they had to do. So he didn't only gave the instruction, but also he modeled the exercise that they had to do. He also gave them feedback all the time, and he was very patient. If you notice, he just waited for the students to think about the answers and tell what they had to say. Okay, what else did you notice about the sequence of the lesson?
Teacher, um,
Sharon?
I think that was a little bit disorganized because in my case, I always try to make a review. Then I give them the instruction of what we are going to do. And during that process, we make this feedback in order to understand what we are going to do. And finally, we make a sharing about the things they wrote for saying something. And I think that the class starts first with the sharing. I know that probably he did it in order to make a kind of, I don't know how to say, um, a, a previous knowledge activity for saying something.
As a warm-up?
Yeah, I think that he was trying to do that at the beginning, but at the end, I didn't notice that he made a proper feedback about the activity and the answers that the students wrote. That's what I
Okay,
think.
that's okay. That's your opinion. Does
Yeah.
anybody else have a different opinion about the sequence of Carlos' lesson, Carlos' video?
I don't know, Tisha. I think that the class was really interesting, and maybe because I always teaches math is completely different when you teach on a lesson in English or on a topic in English, and I think that for me was really um, amazing in that case to be a good teacher because he was really patient and always he tried to give a comfortable harmony around them and try to show a student that they can do it, that they can improve, that it doesn't matter if they make mistakes because they can correct, and that is the idea. And always he was positive with the students, so I think that was really nice. The sequence, I think that was good. Maybe in that case he was clear when say that this an a first class, and they try to introduce the students and try to analyze which is the level of they had. And I think that the class was really nice for me. It's my personal opinion.
Okay, Joanna, thank you. Does anybody have a different opinion about Carlos' sequence? The lesson, the sequence of his lesson? Okay. Um, Although he didn't use a specific method, so you remember that methods give you the sequence, his objective was achieved, or the objective that he planned for his lesson was achieved during the lesson. So he didn't actually use a specific method, but what he planned was achieved. And that can happen if you mix different ways to teach a lesson, or if you have experience teaching. So you have the clear objective, you can make changes during the lesson or just don't follow a specific method in order to help your students achieve the objective. So all these things that we have discussed about his class are positive. Um, as you notice, he didn't focus on grammar. He didn't ask students to fill in the gaps, or he was working on fluency. He was working on having the students communicate orally. It doesn't mean that all the lessons should be that way. We can have students focus on writing, and we can have students work on some grammar exercises during the lesson. But in this case, the objective that he planned was achieved, which was to have students introduce themselves and or, introduce another person. So it was okay. And again, as I told you, it doesn't matter in this case the way he organized the activities, but it was successful for the objective. Liliana wrote that she noticed he got connected with the students, so he made eye contact with them. He was very sure about the topic. It looked very natural. Exactly. So he had a clear objective for the lesson, and he had thought about the stages that he was going to do during the lesson to have students achieve the objective. Although you the ones that saw the whole lesson could identify that he had some problems with the video that he wanted to play. He dealt with that by changing or making the students work on a different exercise while he fixed the technical problem he had with the video. So it looked natural because it was a first class and nobody knew about each other. So they were actually getting real information about each one of them, and it made it communicative and close to reality. Is there anything you would add to that lesson that you would change, that you think could be better?
Well, I think that the way he tried to engage students in this communicative approach, I mean, he started by asking things about his life, but I think that he could improve those questions in order to to let the students be propositive and more participative in the way. I mean, he made the question. The students try to figure how to answer that question, but always by the requirement of the teacher. So I think that could be better if the students answer the question but complemented by other personal experience and not only just saying yes, I have two kids and that's it.
Okay, so that they can actually um, make more decisions during the lesson is what I understand.
Yes.
All right. Thank you, Sharon. A different comment about how to improve the lesson or something you would add to the lesson? Something you would change? Well, so that was an example of a lesson that focus on communication. Again, the lessons doesn't need to be the same all the time. This is just an example. And well, I'm going to ask later one of your classmates if I can share the other lesson that also focus on communication, so you can have a second example. Does anybody want to add something about this before we move to the other topic of our encounter?
Well, I would simply say that he did a good job in managing like this type of first, you know, beginner level um, personalized lessons. To me, in my experience with private lessons, I remember I used to teach for a company that the institution I worked for was hired, and I was sent to teach one-on-one lessons. And believe me, the hardest is to teach students that are at the lowest level, because I remember that when teaching a manager, he already had some knowledge of English, so the lesson would go on because you don't get too hustled up trying to get them to speak, not to get them bored by just, you know, dealing with single word answers from the students because they're not able to produce more. So in this case, I think he did a great job by managing the situation and set a good example for those who are going to teach in that kind of context.
I agree, Giancarlo. So the hardest lessons, the more difficult ones, are with beginners because they don't have enough language to communicate. So, well, if we teach pre-intermediate advanced, we can talk about different topics and it can be um, more interactive, the lesson. As we notice, Carlos' students are not totally beginners. They understand a lot what they listened, but they cannot communicate um, with the same ease. So they need more practice when they speak. They make mistakes, basic mistakes when they speak, and they are not that fluent. So their performance for the different skills is different. So their listening skill is better than their speaking one, and probably their reading will be better than also their speaking skill. So sometimes we usually have this type of students that not their skills are not all in the same level.
That's true.
Okay, does anybody have a different comment about the lesson before we move to the other topic of the encounter? Okay, so we're going to move to the second topic of the encounter, which is CLIL, is what you are reading this week. Okay, does any of you have information about CLIL? What's that?
Okay, I want to say something.
Sharon?
Yes, in this moment, in my work we are using a book which has the clear integrated activities, and I think that is an interesting experience because in this moment we are not only teaching just English and full grammar and vocabulary stuff. We are involving students in other topics, and like in the video, to a cultural learning and different way to use language, because using the CLIL tools, we can engage in students in many things, and also teach them the full grammar that sometimes we need to teach them.
Could you give us an example on how you are teaching culture in the lessons?
Well, for saying something for today, I taught them about collecting stamps in social studies. So using a reading of the book, the students focus in describing what they thought a collection of stamps could help to improve different ways to see hobbies. And the students make several activities in order to make those descriptions. And also the reading has images about a stamp of Frida Kahlo and another stamp, but also involves collecting coins. So I remember that one of the activity was to make a description, but then they have to talk about their favorite hobbies and how those hobbies can help them to understand culture and the way people interchange coins in other centuries. So by using this, students research. I mean, I search in internet about that, and they figure how people in other century interchange coins for food or make payments and all that things, and was kind of interest activity in order to let them use the language and getting involved in social studies.
Okay, so the class, your class is not only about English, but it was social studies. The topic was coins and stamps and how they reflect the culture of a place, and then you link that.
Yes, and by using this, I led them to use this. I mean, because they have to make descriptions about the coins and the stamps, but we already are working in grammar, present simple and present continuous. So it was not mandatory to use it, but they use the grammar structure about present simple. But when they were talking about the interchange of the coins, they use the simple past tense. So in this way, I figure that students make those production activity using the grammar structure that we already saw.
Okay, so as you mentioned, students were not required to use a specific structure. That happened that they start using present continuous when they talked about.
Yes, it was kind of hiding use of grammar structures in the activity.
Well, but there is no way to do that. Well, the idea of content language integrated learning, which is clearly the case in your case, was social studies within it. The focus is not on a specific grammar topic. But anyway, they need to use it. They need to use grammar and different structures to communicate. So probably during the lesson, the teacher will need to explain some grammar to help the students talk.
And the book allow the student to use the grammar structure they need to use in order to make those productions.
Okay. Well, thanks, Sharon. Does anybody else have information about CLIL? What do teachers need to have into account in order to teach a class that is that has or that takes into account the principles of CLIL? What does teaching with CLIL involves?
You mean according to the video or according to any previous experience?
Both.
Well, according to the video, I have a previous experience, but I'm not sure if that is good experience. So that's why I'm a little bit reluctant to share. But according to the video, it says that CLIL focuses on on what she said. She called it the four C's of CLILs. And I just don't remember, but somewhere communication, I think was culture, and well, somebody help me with this one. Uh,
Cognitive.
Cognitive, yes, and the other one was yes,
Culture.
cognition, culture, content, communication, and cognition. Yeah.
Exactly.
So that was something pretty much what the video said about the model of implementation. In order for us to say that this is a clear lesson, it should have for those elements present in the lesson.
And do
So
you remember like more information about any of those aspects of CLIL, either communication, content, cognition, or culture?
well, I remember that she says that communication involves the students need to use the language. It's like we wouldn't say it's a clear lesson if we're just giving them content and they do not use anything. Uh, they don't use they don't use communicative skills in order to do something with whatever they're learning. So the communication part was important. The culture has to do with bringing the world to the classroom. I remember she mentioned something like world citizenship, for example, and some other like cultural skills that need to be present in the lesson. So either way, we're not doing like teaching a lesson of English or focusing on content if we're not bringing a part of the world to the students, or having the students become aware of the fact that by having these discussions in a foreign language, they're also like acquiring skills to relate or to be part of the world.
Exactly.
And for cognition, she proposed the use of mind maps and all this type of graphs, like all these cognitive skills that can be fostered in the class for students to create things. So in a clear lesson, students should either be being critical, applying critical thinking skills, or being creative by creating something based on the content that they're learning and using communication to like collaborate in groups and reflect on any of those cultural skills that she mentioned.
Exactly. Thank you, Giancarlo. Who else remembers something about the four aspects of CLIL? What about the content? What does the video tell us about the content? Or what's your experience, if any of you had an experience using CLIL in the classroom? What about the content?
Teacher, in I remember in the content say that the content means that anything that you will use to teach your unit or your topic, and in that case, say that they should be on a multimodal. In that case, is when the teacher use different or multiple sources. For example, not only the text, but use they can use articles, images, videos. Different activities or different things that they can use to catch the attention of the students. It's maybe about it when we talk about the content.
Exactly. So the teachers need to use different sources
Games.
to get the content. Mm-hmm. And as Giancarlo wrote, it should be not only about grammar or language, but should be related to other subjects like science, art, music, geography, or any other. Okay, does anybody else remember information about the four aspects of CLIL, or that have you ever had an experience with this uh, approach? It's actually this person that in the video defines CLIL as a structure, not a method, because it doesn't tell us like the stages that we need to follow for a lesson that are considered effective when teaching and that should be taken into account when teaching. So this person defines CLIL as a structure, or it could be we can tell that it's an approach to teaching. So somebody else who remembers more information about the four aspects or an experience you have had with CLIL.
Teacher, another important thing is that the video mentioned about the differentiated students and it says about the shy students, the
Exactly.
the using some clear activities we can um, improve their ability to socialize with others in the way we connect the student with the topic by sharing and all the ways, because in those kind of activities the student is the one who determines the way he's going to learn, and also how he or she can use that knowledge, not only by a communicative approach or expression, only just by the use of this knowledge, not specifically in grammar or the English stuff, but also how they get involved in science, arts, music, technology, social studies, and all that things. I think that's important to mention, that students learn in different ways because the abilities and the skills they have. So for that reason, for me, it's important to mention that those kind of the students that we most of us have in our classrooms.
Okay. Right, Shannon. So CLIL reminds teachers that not everybody learns the same way and not everybody performs the same way. That we have some students that are shy and they don't like to talk, but they are better at writing, or the opposite. So that we need to take into account these different ways of learning. That is called differentiated learning. Good. Does anybody remember what is hard and soft, Cleo?
Teacher, one important issue that I remember is that you learn for doing, not learning by heart, just by heart. Yeah, the important thing is that you have to learn to know how to do things.
Okay, good. So what you remember, they mentioned in that part PBL. They say that we learn by doing. So what's the connection with PBL?
No, teacher, I cannot remember it exactly.
With what, teacher? Excuse me.
With PBL, PBL, that the
The
method,
project.
well, the approach.
Well, I just love this way of teaching, but by using projects, we can let the students to demonstrate the understanding of the things they the catch of the activity, or the knowledge that they acquired during the process. I mean, because in PBL, students research, figure, solve problems, establish requirements to solve the problems they already planned for the project. So it's a way to allow students to not only use the language, but also to use other resources in order to improve different skills like problem solving, is which is the other, I forgot it. Make critical thinking, analyzing situations, get involved in a context. I mean, the student is the main actor in this story. So for that reason, using PBL is an easy way to let the students improve the way they learn by doing different activities to figure the goal they establish for the project. So CLIL gets involved in this kind of projects in the way the student continue and solve different matters that they establish during the process.
Exactly. So the four C's, the four aspects of CLIL remind that it is important to learn by doing. So by using projects, or by having students be the center of the process, so they are the ones that make decisions, maybe to guide them and to teach them, for example, strategies on how to learn. Um, so again, the content is something that we, in the content, the CLIL reminds teachers that We need to help the students scaffold or learn in an easy way, give them the steps so they can move from the easiest to the most difficult. But they are the ones that are in the center of the process. Right. What else do you remember about these four aspects?
Teacher, I think that all these four components are connected by the scaffolding resource that we use. Because for me, this scaffolding tool for saying something is that things that we do as teachers to help the student to improve the way they learn, the acquisition of language, the use of it, also the contents, and by the formative assessment that we create to give them our support for their learning.
Exactly. So teachers guide students, tutor students, help them support the process, help the students understand that as here we need to help them connect previous knowledge with new knowledge. And that is basically what scaffolding is about, to help them move from the easiest to the most difficult. What about the communication, the language that is used in the classroom when focusing on CLIL or when using CLIL approach? So Shadow mentioned an example when she taught a class for social science, and she moved from having students talk about stamps as a way to reflect culture, and then she connected that with students' hobbies, or probably, yeah, students' hobbies. So in that lesson, she needed to move or to take into account the language of social studies, which is called the language of the subject, the specific subject, in this case, social studies, with the language for, which is the language used to get something when we interact. So something is that we find in the books, like the theory of different subjects or different areas, and something is the language that is used in interaction or daily communication. And the language through is the language that is used to connect both the language of the subject or of the theory with the language that is used in daily communication. So here, for example, on the right, we have that teachers need to take into account cognates, circumlocution, cooperative learning, signposting, visuals. L1 supports L2, graphic organizers. So these are like some ways to help the students understand the language of, the language for, and who can define or who remembers the definition of cognates and circumlocution. What's that? What are cognates and what's circumlocution? Nobody? Well, remember that cognates are words that are similar to the L1. So, for example, if I say situation is a word that sounds similar in Spanish, situación. So those are the words that teachers usually use with beginners to help them understand the ideas. Those are cognates. And what's circumlocution? is when we teach students to say the ideas in different ways. So sometimes they don't find the exact way they don't know the exact way they wanted to use. They think it in Spanish, but they don't have the translation into English. So we can teach them how to say the same ideas by using different ways. So these are like some things that we need to take into account when we have students work with the language using CLIL, so that we can have visuals to help them understand the meaning of the words. We can use cognates, circumlocution, we can have graphic organizers, we can have L1 to support L2, we can have signs, we can help the students work cooperatively. All right. Finally, does any of you remember what's HOTS and LOTS? No idea? So HOTS are high order thinking skills. Shadow mentioned analyzing, critical thinking. She mentioned creativity. So those are high order thinking skills and should be promoted during the lesson. And lots are low order thinking skills to memorize, to understand, to identify. Like the first things that we do when we up to do something more difficult, that implies to give opinions, to make comparisons, to analyze something, or to create something. So this whole approach of CLIL reminds again teachers that we need to help students achieve high order thinking skills. Okay, does anybody have a question about this or about the course before we finish?
Well, I don't have a question about the content, but I would like to ask you for a suggestion. I don't know if you are aware, but some of us are taking the legal state exam for higher education this Sunday. So I don't know if there's any recommendation that you would like to give us for that.
Could you repeat the question? If I have any recommendation regarding?
We're taking Saber Pro this weekend, so I would like to know if there's something you would like to recommend. This, if pretty much of us are taking that exam this Sunday. So like I'm working on reviewing some of the things and the topics that we cover throughout the program. But I don't know if there's anything that you might want to give us as a recommendation for that.
Well, probably you have heard that Saber Pro regarding the field of English is the same for all the academic programs. So usually the students from a different program, like engineering, like psychology, let's say as an A2 or B1 level. But for students that are studying for being teachers of English, it is going to be easy because it's like to take a PET test. Some of you probably have checked or have read about PET, which is one of the first exams in a series of exams of Cambridge, which is PET, FCE, and finally IELTS. So it is actually very easy. You will find out multiple choice questions, or you will be given a series of pictures. You will see a series of pictures, and you will need to find out the one that matches a specific sentence. So that's easy for students that are studying for being English teachers. So those of you who know how the PET is or the type of questions in PET, you will find out similar questions in the Saber Pro.
Do you know if for the teaching module, is there anything related to like general teaching or general didactics, or it's specifically related to our disciplinary area of knowledge, like teaching English, or
Specifically about didactics, no, but we could probably have a, a virtual encounter devoted to the topic of didactics.
no, okay. I just wanted to to know anything because pretty much we know we're going to take the exam, but some of us like don't have much information on beyond what we can find on the internet of what the exam is going to be like. I think it would be a good idea to have some inputs on what we're going to find on Sunday. Try to get the good scores for the program.
Okay, yes, as far as I know, like Saber Pro for English teachers or for people who are studying to be English teachers is not that difficult. It's not signed actually for your field. That is like the English that everybody needs to know, like the basics of English that all the students from different programs need to know.
Okay, thank you.
Teacher, I think talking about pedagogical things, talking about didactics is very general. Talking about English, you're right, teacher. It's the same English, the same test for everyone. So for us, it's very easy. So I think the test is easy. Taking into account the specific things for us that is teaching, and taking into account the English. In the morning, you have to do the same things than the others. That is like reading comprehension, writing, general things, but it's the same for everyone. So in the specific thing, it's very easy. I repeat it.
Exactly, Andres. So you will find questions about like theories on teaching or theory about pedagogy or didactics. You won't find any question about that. Just will measure your performance on English to how to teach or how people learn a language.
All right, thank you. I appreciate all your comments and suggestions.
Okay, Giancarlo. Good. This week you're reading about CLIL, and next week you need to video record your second lesson. So it means that by Sunday, I need to publish the feedback of all your. By Sunday, you can read the feedback and you can probably make some changes in your lesson before you video record the class. Okay. Is there any other question before we finish? Okay, good. So I appreciate your comments and your participation. I invite those of you who don't participate during the encounters that start doing it for the future encounters. Usually, as you have seen, what we do is to share our experiences or just opinions. So this is not something like that needs like like you have a specific knowledge about something. That we try to share here our experiences. So I invite those of you who have not participated or that usually don't participate to do it next time. The second video recording, you need to upload it before October 13th. No, sorry, October 14th. That's the deadline to upload the second video recording. Okay, so that's all. Thank you very much and have a good night. We'll meet next Wednesday.
Thank you. Good night, everyone.
Thank you. Good night.
Okay, thank you very much. Have a good night, everyone.